Madame Ojo was a well-known name in the busy city of Onitsha. She wasn't just any tailor. She was a miracle worker with her needle and thread. People traveled from different towns just to place orders for her extremely beautiful dresses, which she made for all kinds of occasions, weddings, birthdays, and festive events. It wasn't just that her designs were beautiful. Her creations were unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. People marveled at how fast she worked. A dress that would take other seamstresses days or even weeks, Madame Ojo finished in mere hours. Yes, you read that right. She could finish a custom-made dress in under an hour. Customers would enter her humble shop, give her their measurements, and by the time they returned, their outfits, each one unique and beautifully crafted, would be ready. At times, they didn't even have to leave. They could wait right there, while Madame Ojo worked her magic. There was one rule, though. A rule every customer had to follow. No one, under any circumstances, could try on their clothes in the shop. Madame Ojo's small shop stood at the edge of the bustling Onitsha market. Her reputation spread far and wide. People both near and far came to her shop, eagerly waiting to see what magic she would weave next. The dresses she crafted seemed enchanted, as if sewn with threads from the stars themselves. But her talent wasn't just in her creativity. It was in her speed. She could take a customer's measurements and hand them the finished dress within an hour. It was as though she worked with some unseen force. Her clothes were breathtaking. Gowns that sparkled, traditional wrappers with intricate beading, and contemporary designs adorned her shelves. It was the kind of shop that left you in amazement, not knowing where to look first. Yet the rule stood firm. Don't try on the clothes inside the shop. People followed the rule without question. They accepted it because of how effortlessly Madame Ojo made them the most beautiful, well-fitted dresses they had ever worn. While other tailors allowed customers to try on their garments in fitting rooms, Madame Ojo's was the only shop where that privilege was denied. She measured precisely, and within an hour, the dress was ready for pickup. And once it was handed over, no one thought to question the fitting. Madame Ojo's work was always perfect. But there was one thing, just one thing, no one could ever break. You could not, under any circumstance, try on your clothes before you left her shop. That was the rule. One afternoon, 3 friends, CHIKA, Ada, and Ifeoma, walked into Madame Ojo's shop. CHIKA was picking up a dress she had ordered for her cousin's wedding. She had spoken about Madame Ojo's incredible skill so often that Ada and Ifeoma couldn't wait to see it for themselves. When they stepped inside, Ifeoma gasped. The shop was filled with the most stunning garments they had ever seen. Sparkling dresses, regal wraps, and colorful outfits, unlike anything before. It was the kind of place that made you feel like you were stepping into a dream. CHIKA was proud to show her friends the shop she had raved about. "This is where I ordered my dress," she said, beaming. Ada ran her fingers over the delicate embroidery of a nearby gown. "Wow, I've never seen anything like this," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "We should get our measurements taken too. I need something for my sister's wedding." "I told you," CHIKA whispered back. "Wait until you see how fast she works." Madame Ojo was busy measuring a young girl when they arrived. The tailor smiled warmly at the 3 friends, acknowledging their presence as she quickly finished up with the other customer. Her hands moved with remarkable speed, each stitch seeming to have a life of its own. Her presence was calming, but there was something else in her eyes, a look of constant vigilance, like someone watching carefully for any sign of rule-breaking. CHIKA approached the tailor with a bright smile. "I'm here to pick up my dress, Madame Ojo." The tailor nodded and swiftly went into the back room. Within moments, she returned with CHIKA's dress wrapped in a gleaming silk bag. "Here you go," she said, handing it over. "I can't wait to try it on," CHIKA said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Madame Ojo's smile didn't fade. Her voice grew more serious. "Remember the rule, my dear. No trying it on here." CHIKA nodded. "Of course, Madame Ojo. I'll try it on at home." While Madame Ojo attended to Ada, Ifeoma grew curious. She had heard so much about Madame Ojo's rule and the miraculous designs that were crafted in this shop, but she couldn't understand why it was such a big deal. She glanced around the shop, her eyes landing on a stunning green dress hanging on one of the mannequins. It shimmered in the dim light, as though the fabric itself was alive. The temptation was too much for Ifeoma. "I have to try this on," she whispered to herself. She carefully walked toward the corner of the shop, where the dress hung, and without thinking, she slipped into it. As soon as she pulled it over her head, a chill ran down her spine. The fabric seemed to cling to her skin in an odd way, as though it were holding her in place. Something didn't feel right. She looked around to see if Madame Ojo was still distracted. But no sooner had she looked up than she met the gaze of the tailor, whose eyes were filled with terror. Madame Ojo's face twisted with panic as she rushed toward Ifeoma. "What are you doing?" she shouted, her voice trembling with anger and fear. I was just curious," Ifeoma stammered, now realizing her mistake. Madame Ojo reached out and yanked the dress from Ifeoma's shoulders. Her hands shook as she backed away. "No, get out! All of you, out of my shop!" Chika and Ada were stunned. Madame Ojo had always been calm and composed, but now she was trembling with rage. They tried to speak, but the words caught in their throats. "Leave my shop!" Madame Ojo yelled. "Leave now!" The three friends left in silence, unsure of what had just transpired. As they stepped out of the shop, Chika's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Why was Madame Ojo so upset? What had Ifeoma done wrong? Over the next few days, whispers began to spread about Madame Ojo's strange behavior. Her once steady hands had begun to tremble uncontrollably. The dress that she had made for Chika seemed to lose its perfect fit, and soon even her most loyal customers noticed the change. Madame Ojo's magic was fading. As time went on, her once steady hands grew weak and swollen. She could no longer sew with the same precision, and her dresses started to fall apart. Her customers, once faithful, began to turn away. Her shop, once crowded with customers, stood empty. It wasn't long before word of her decline spread through the city. The once great tailor, who had created such beautiful clothes, was now struggling to complete even one dress. She had lost everything. What the customers didn't know was that many years ago, Madame Ojo had made a deal with a spirit in exchange for the power to create the most exquisite dresses. The spirit had given her the ability to design clothing unlike any other, but the price had been steep. The spirit had warned her, never allow anyone to try on the clothes in her shop. Now, thanks to Ifeoma's curiosity, Madame Ojo had lost her gift, and there was no way to get it back. The hands that once moved with grace and skill were now swollen and blackened, a painful reminder of the rule that had been broken. Madame Ojo tried everything to regain her ability to sew, but it was hopeless. The magic was gone. The shop that had once been filled with customers now stood in silence. The dresses that once sparkled with magic were now nothing more than fabric and thread, their beauty lost forever. Madame Ojo sat in the shop, her hands swollen and useless, and thought back to the days when she had everything: the dresses, the customers, the admiration. Now it was all gone. All because of one broken rule. As Madame Ojo sat in the corner of her shop, despair weighing heavily on her heart, she couldn't help but feel utterly lost. Her hands, once agile and skilled in creating the most intricate dresses in Onitsha, were now swollen and sore. No matter what she did, no amount of medication or remedies seemed to ease the pain. Her sewing machine stood silent, collecting dust, while the memories of her once thriving business faded with each passing day. Her reputation was in ruins, and people, who once praised her talent, now whispered behind her back, avoiding her at all costs. The fear of what had happened to her seemed to cling to her like a dark shadow. But even in her loneliness, one person refused to give up on her. Chika, the young woman who had once worn the dress that had become Madame Ojo's downfall, came to visit her regularly. Though everyone else had abandoned her, Chika continued to show up at Madame Ojo's doorstep, bringing food, checking on her, and offering encouragement. "Madame Ojo, don't worry. Things will get better. I know it," Chika said, her voice filled with hope. Madame Ojo looked up at Chika, her eyes filled with gratitude, but also with sadness. "How can I ever get back to where I was? My hands. I can't even sew anymore." Chika smiled warmly. "There's still hope, Madame Ojo. You just have to trust and believe." Despite her doubts, Madame Ojo couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope at Chika's words. But her physical condition only seemed to worsen, and the swelling in her hands spread to her arms. The pain grew unbearable, and yet no one could provide an answer as to why this was happening to her. One day, As Madame Ojo sat in her shop feeling utterly hopeless, Chika arrived again, this time with a man by her side. Madame Ojo, Chika said gently, I've brought someone to pray for you. Madame Ojo looked at Chika skeptically. A prayer? I don't know, Chika. I've tried everything. Medicine, herbs, even rest, and nothing has worked. Chika's face was filled with unwavering faith. I believe God can heal you. Just trust in Him. The man of God, a humble figure with a calm presence, stepped forward. He looked at Madame Ojo and smiled gently. My dear, there is nothing that God cannot do. If you believe, He will heal you. Madame Ojo hesitated but eventually nodded. With a sense of surrender, she closed her eyes as the man of God laid his hands on her swollen arms. His prayer was powerful, filled with conviction. Lord, I ask that you restore Madame Ojo's health. Heal her body and give her the strength to rise again. For a few moments, the shop was filled with silence. Then, as if by a miracle, Madame Ojo felt a strange warmth coursing through her body. She opened her eyes and, to her amazement, the pain in her hands had started to subside. Slowly, the swelling in her arms began to go down. It was a gradual process, but the change was undeniable. Madame Ojo's heart swelled with gratitude. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, Thank you, God. Thank you for giving me another chance. Chika smiled brightly. I knew it. I told you God was watching over you. With the healing of her hands, Madame Ojo's spirit was revived. She didn't waste any time and immediately returned to her sewing. Though the road was tough at first, with many people still afraid to trust her, Madame Ojo pushed forward. Chika had suggested she try again, and even though the fear of rejection lingered, Madame Ojo knew she had no choice but to fight. The first few dresses she made were difficult. Her fingers were still a little stiff, and the designs weren't as flawless as before. But Madame Ojo didn't give up. Slowly, she regained her confidence. And with each passing day, the perfection returned to her work. The fear that had gripped her heart started to fade, replaced by the joy of creating. Then, something miraculous happened. As people began to see the dresses she was producing, the rumors of her healing spread. What once seemed impossible became a reality. Madame Ojo's skill had returned, and her dresses were more breathtaking than ever. The intricate beadwork, the delicate lace, and the perfect cuts that had once made her a legend in Onitsha were now more beautiful than anything anyone had seen before. Soon, people began to return. Those who had once been afraid to wear her dresses came knocking at her door, eager to have Madame Ojo create for them again. The town buzzed with excitement. Madame Ojo was back, and her reputation was restored. She looked at the first dress she completed after her healing, a vibrant red gown with gold accents, and marveled at how far she had come. Her hands were no longer swollen, and her skill was sharper than ever. The woman who had been abandoned, feared, and shunned was now revered as the best tailor in Onitsha once again. Madame Ojo's redemption didn't come from the healing of her hands. It came from her faith in God and the support of people like Chika, who never gave up on her. Chika's belief in her, even when the world turned its back, had been the spark that ignited Madame Ojo's journey back to herself. In the end, Madame Ojo realized that her story wasn't just one of success. It was a story of grace, of second chances, and of the power of faith. She had found her way back, not just as a tailor, but as a woman who had overcome the impossible. And every dress she made from that point on carried a piece of her redemption. A reminder that with God, nothing is ever truly lost. Hi besties, we have finally come to the end of this amazing story. Hope you enjoyed and learned something from it. Now, before I go, I want to ask a question, and I will do. Really like to hear your response. If you walked into a shop and they had rules like this, would you stay there for their service or would you leave? Leave your response in the comment section. If you found this story interesting, click on the link to watch more interesting stories. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do. It's free, as it helps us bringing you more amazing stories. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next story. Bye.